Hello, everyone. Today, my speech is going to be about storytelling. I'm not a great storyteller to the masses, but probably I try with my kids. I brought Omar. He's my eldest son. I always spend most of my time with them, telling them stories, either about them when they were kids, myself, my mother, my grandmother, and sometimes we make up stories. And I invite them to tell the story and retell the story. Sometimes on purpose, I start a story when one of my kids is absent so that I can watch them retell the story to each other. And the results are always amazing. The topic of storytelling is something I am interested in as a Palestinian average man and as an academic at the Islamic University. Something that happened to me last month when I went with my friends to Gaza seaport to buy fish. Of all the types we have very limited types of fish, but there were still a few. I liked one particular fish. It's the swordfish. I don't know why. I went to that particular fish. I took pictures and took more pictures, and I almost carried it and asked my friends to take pictures of me and of that particular fish. One of my friends said, "Why this? Why this particular fish?" I didn't answer. I didn't know why. But I felt this bond, this strong connection between me and between this type of fish. When I went back home that day, I started thinking of why I did that. When all of a sudden, I remembered something my mom told me as a kid, a story about a swordfish in which a group of fish were caught by a fisherman, and it was the heroic, the brave swordfish that managed to free them, set them free. Apparently, my mom was teaching me patriotism, bravery, to stand for one's friends, to stand for one's family, to stand for one's homeland, to stand for, to struggle for rights, to struggle for the people around me, the ones I love and the ones I know and the ones I don't know. And so many other stories also rushed to my mind. One of them is the story of the cat, about a lazy boy whose mom asked him to go out and check if it was raining. He was too lazy to stand up, probably watching TV. And he said, "Mom, let's wait for the cat. When it comes back, we can feel the cat. If it is wet, then it must be raining." She told the story to me again and again and again. Probably she wanted me not to be lazy. Maybe I'm not lazy, or I'm not very, very lazy. Thank God my wife is not here to tell you. But I also remembered stories that, other than the fictional stories my mom told me, real stories about me. And that's me when I was a kid. One of my friends was joking that if the people are not going to laugh after your jokes or your stories, they're going to laugh at your pictures. I don't know. My mom told me so many stories when Israel invaded Gaza, of herself going to school despite the fact that the bombs, the shells were raining all over the place. And one particular experience still makes my hair stand on end. She told me how she narrowly escaped death when she was going to school one day. And the other day, she woke up, she took her bag, and she went to school. Nothing stopped my mom from going to school. And probably for that reason, I have never, ever in my life missed a class or skipped a class. Unless Dr. Ayman Al-Hallag is here, then maybe I skipped one class. And I started thinking of these stories, and I realized that I am the person I am today because of these stories, because of my mom, because my mom was teaching me values, was teaching me etiquette, was teaching me to love people, to love my life. She was teaching me to love my country at the same time. I started also thinking of my early memories. And I went to my mom that day and started telling her of particular experiences that keep flash into my mind. When I realized something that I haven't paid attention to before in my life. She told me, Rifat, it's impossible for you to remember this because you were 1 or 2 years old. And then I realized I must have lived these stories. Despite the fact that I can vividly describe these stories. I must have lived them through my mom's stories. So her experiences, her life became my life. And that's how my life was shaped. Stories are also important in our lives as Palestinians, as people under occupation, as native peoples on this land, not only because they make us, they shape us, they make us the people we are, but also because they connect us with our past. They connect us with our present, and they prepare us to the future. I also remember my grandmother, bless her. Every day when we were kids during the First Intifada, every day for years and years, we would spend the evening at our grandparents'. My grandpa would be ready, making the best tea ever. And the best thing about him was he would always add as much sugar as we wanted. That was the best thing in our lives. But when we finished the tea, when we finished the sugar, we would leave our grandpa and turn to our grandmother for her stories. Because that is what we always waited for, our grandmother's stories. And no matter how much more sugar our grandfather added, we never left her side. We never left her side because that was the best day of our day. My grandmother was clearly exercising power over us, was clearly competing with the fact that our grandfather always wanted us around him, and she always won. Our grandmother always won. Now, the serious question here is when our grandmothers tell us stories, they tend to inject these stories with values, with meanings. Sometimes we do this, we inject things, but our grandmothers, our moms, they speak spontaneously. They speak from personal experience. They tell us stories about their own lives. They describe life beyond the armistice line, for example. My grandmother told us stories when she was a kid, when she was a newly married wife who would spend months plowing her land, harvesting the crops. The land that now we don't own because it was occupied. Although the land is physically occupied, it still lives in our memories. It still lives in our hearts because we can easily visualize this. And this makes me always think of Suad al-Amri, the wonderful Palestinian writer. She said when she went back to Jaffa, she has never been to Jaffa before. When she went to Jaffa, she said, I could tell whose house was that and whose shop was that. And I could tell what happened to my mom here and what happened to my dad there. Because I lived these experiences in my own mother's stories. However, some of these stories are dying out because the old are dying, and also because we stopped caring about these stories. That is unfortunate, but it is true. We spend too much time on TV, and we spend too much time gazing at our smartphones. Even when we go visit our grandparents or our parents, we're usually busy gazing at our websites, at our smartphones. We don't care as much as we used to care in the past. And that is very dangerous. Now, Edward Said warns of this. If we stop caring about stories, if we stop telling our stories, if we stop listening to our parents, we create space, we create vacuum for others to occupy this virtual space in our past, in our heart. Edward Said says, history is made by men and women. And I love the fact that he refers to this, the fact that this is something made by women and men, not leaders, not politicians, not the elite. because the history, the oral history for us Palestinians belongs to you, to me, to our mom, to our dad, to our grandparents, to your parents, and to your grandparents. Because the oral history should always belong to the people, should shape politics, not the other way around. History is made by men and women, just as it can also be unmade and unwritten in case we just leave it and keep silent. And this also takes me to an amazing story of a native Canadian. When the colonizers took over North America, and they wanted to divide the land among themselves, one of the eldest approached them. He asked, "What are you doing?" He said, "We own the land. We are dividing the land among ourselves." He said, "If this is your land, tell me your stories. If this is indeed your land, tell me your stories." And of course, the answer is silence, because they had no stories and they don't own the land. And it also takes me to Africa. And I love how talking about oral history and storytelling connects indigenous native people from all over the world. Chinua Achebe teaches us something. This is a lesson for us all. If the lions do not have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunters, will always glorify the occupier, will always glorify the colonizer, rather than the colonized, the oppressed, the indigenous, the rightful people of the land. And believe me, people out there are looking forward to our stories. They want our stories. They seek our stories. And this is the very amazing success story of Gaza Writes Back, which is a book. Gaza Writes Back is a book of 23 stories written in English by young Palestinian men and women between the age of 17 and 25. 13 of the 15 writers are females. 13 of the 15 writers are women, are young women. And this again takes me back to the fact that my mom made me. My mom made me the man I am because of her stories. And my grandmother made me love my country, my homeland. And we have more women telling stories than men nowadays. Gaza Writes Back was translated into 6 languages, was published in America, and it is all over the world. Not because of the book, but because of the stories that the young people managed to write. We have been contacted from people around the world, as far as Japan, Brazil, people in Italy, in South Africa, people in Malaysia, in America, in Canada. We've been contacted by those people, and we spoke about our experience as Palestinians because of the power of the story. Let's tell more stories. And sometimes, when we tell stories about our homeland, we love the story because it is about our homeland. And we love our homeland even more because of the story. What now? What should we do? What should be done? Let's go back home. And when we go back home, let's talk to our parents, to our grandparents. Let's approach them. Let's seek their stories. Let's beg them to tell us stories and to tell us more. And when they tell us stories, let's carry these stories and tell them to our little ones, to our kids, to our boys, to our girls. Because if we don't do that, if the story stops there, we're betraying ourselves. We're betraying the story. We're betraying our parents and grandparents. And we are betraying our homeland. Thank you very much.